Welcome to the Family Office Sherpa podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Parkin, founder and managing director of Whole Road Investments. The aim of this podcast is to provide practical and implementable advice for those looking to build, manage, or service a family office. This is not, however, investment advice, so please check the disclaimer in the show notes. In this episode, I'm going to reflect on investing how you said you want to invest.
This is the Family Office Sherpa.
So there's a pattern I see repeatedly working with family offices, and even just contacts and conversations and things like that. You sit in a room with a family and you ask them how you want to invest, which, alludes to that whole idea of purpose and things like that, because obviously the purpose or the charter sits at the top, and then that is implemented via the investment policy, right? So in those meetings, often you'll get a really clear, considered answer around things like values matter, concentration is a risk, we are long-term investors, we don't hold positions out of sentiment, we're, all these sorts of things. We're disciplined with rebalancing, things like that. And then you look at the portfolio, and often what you find, not always, but often what you find is a different story. There's things like a significant amount of single stock, some that have grown significantly, other asset classes that have grown significantly. You talk about the investment policy, and then you look at the portfolio, and there is specific restrictions on sizes, and obviously the portfolio is in breach of it. But there is an element of, it's okay because we believe in that business or we believe in that asset, things like that. Things like environmental, social, and governance or impact, there's a commitment by the family in a lot of the documentation, but it hasn't made it anywhere near the investment process. It's not even in the investment policy sometimes. Things like a manager that's underperformed for a significant amount of times, but because there's a long-term relationship, then when it sticks into it, it still sits in the portfolio. Direct positions that don't match the criteria for that asset class. It's not that the intention isn't genuine, but it's really, really hard to be prescriptive or process-driven around getting those investments to reflect how you state that you want to invest. And this is why it's interesting. This isn't about bad faith. It's about the gap between what we believe we'll do and what we'll actually do when it's real, right? So philosophically, and I sort of alluded to that in the previous podcast, which is around the implementation at IPS, is we're taking it from the abstract here, which is this is how we believe that we should, and this is our philosophy, and what we actually do when the stakes are real. The P&L is real. We are invested. We've got emotion, we've got relationships, inertia sometimes. Good governance is what pulls it towards us. So that's what this episode's about. What I'm going to do is go through, 6 points where it's actually going to be helpful for those that are having that conversation, right? And this should arm you, or this should at least guide you with, we say this is what we want to do, we're not doing it, or we're struggling to do it. These are some steps that we can take, right? Number one, the investment policy versus the actual portfolio. So this is why investment policies are so great or so required, because the investment policy sometimes, and this is what we say, right? The investment policy gets written and then it gets filed. And what we need to do is get that to be used as an operational tool. One of the recommendations I do make when we do investment policies is for every meeting that we have at the investment committee level is to bring a crib sheet or a Cliff Notes kind of version of it, which is making sure that when we do have the conversations, we are reflecting back onto this. We look at the portfolio, but we look at what our investment portfolio's policy statement said about asset class sizes. It says about position sizes. It says about the way that we invest. A lot of the investment committees is is talking about potential new investments. Having that crib sheet in front of her, or having that really like one pager even, or even like a visual sometimes is super helpful. It means that we're going to reflect on that every time, right? Because the investment policy and the actual portfolio should align. No one is comparing them sometimes what you see is they don't get compared on a regular basis. You need that touch point. You need to come and to avoid that portfolio drift, which becomes without, if you don't check it, or you don't have some alignment, some sort of table that says this is where we're at, this is where we said we would be, then it will just drift. And, deviation is normal. Markets move up and down and things like that. But it's the undocumented deviation that you've got to be really careful of. So next one, ESG, so environmental, social and governance, and impact. Now, I know ESG, everyone kind of just looks at the E part, but we'll park that for a second. But impact in a true to label kind of way as well. They're nice words, but if there's no monitor or nothing in the documentation that says that's what we're going to do, then you're not going to do it. Charter language sometimes, and actually rarely, makes it into the investment policy with specifics. Things that say, we have taken the information from the charter, and the responsibility to manage and monitor that is that of the investment manager. So putting that onto the investment manager to make sure that when they do manage the investments, this is a part of it. If you don't, then it doesn't reflect the purpose document. And you have to have that conversation. Sometimes that's a hard conversation to have, right? If there's no defined framework, there's no exclusion enforcements, then no one owns this process, right? There's no review owner. If it's in the charter, it must be in the IPS. It's in my opinion, anyway. And if it's not, it has to be alluded to in there, and it has to be notified that it's not in there, so that when the family or when people look at the portfolio or the investment policy and they say, well, hang on, didn't we say we wanted to have impact and some overlay of environmental, social and governance? Where is that? Well, then that's a question that needs to be answered. And the next generation usually is the one that asks that. And you need to have answers ready for them. Right, number 3, you got to hold current management accountable. There has to be an element. So the IC, so the investment committee, is a fundamental part of this process, because what you do see is sometimes the investment team, the internal investment team, or the OCIO or the family member or whatever it is that manages the portfolio, they can't objectively review their own compliance or their own, you can't mark your own homework. So there needs to be some accountability within the process. It requires independence. This is why investment committees need some version of independence, or some version of, well, I'm not part of the office, I'm not part of the investment team, I'm not part of the supplier. And honestly, that's usually where I sit. I'm the independent person that sits within these structures a lot of the time. So having that accountability or that interrogation, like I said, the critical friend, is so, so important when it comes to having that person that says, I don't understand what we're doing because it doesn't match with what we said we would do, right? Especially when it comes to individual investments. I like a form that says new investment, because the person that has to fill it out has to think about it. Like, what asset classes are we putting it into? What's it going to do to the portfolio? Who's the portfolio manager for this? Who's the asset manager or the counterparty that we're dealing with? All these sorts of things. I love that kind of, I don't want to sound like I'm the killjoy here or the fun police, but what it does allow me to do is be that person who goes, I get it. It matches what we're trying to do because this is where it states that it matches it, right? And that's really good. And that's really good for sort of reflection as well. When you go back to it and you go, well, why did we do this? And it's really helpful to sort of go that, you document decisions, you document the rationale, and you document the expected outcome every time, right? So that's just something to think about for holding current management accountable for investing how we say we want to invest. Another one, number 4, don't fall in love with positions. Legacy holdings are a challenging conversation to have. One of my roles is to be that person that can come in and say, why do we have this position? Why do we have this single stock or this direct venture business or this holding and this holding and this holding. And being able to sort of look from an outside point of view and saying, why do we have this? Because it doesn't match what we said in our purpose and our investment policy. So legacy holdings, they have history, right? That's what they are. They hold history, but not necessarily portfolio rationale. It's rarely tested against the investment policy. It's just this kind of outlier we just potentially don't talk about. And the question I've always asked is, would we invest in it today on those terms and at that size if we could? Like, take that now and would you invest in it? Not to say because it's done well or it's done poorly, but does it fit the rationale for what we've talked about? Like I said, the investment policy should define these exit triggers and rebalancing triggers and process before emotion enters it. So, everyone falls in love with positions. Everyone falls in love with narratives and counterparties and people and things like that. And it's completely understandable. And this is ultimately an emotion-driven or a people-driven business, right? Because it's family office. But you still need to be objective around these things. And like I said, holding the investment accountable for what we're trying to do. Number 5, be disciplined. Like I've said before, build a process to remove emotion if you can. I know, discipline kind of, again, sounds like, oh God, this guy, he just keeps trying to take the fun out of investments, but I'm not trying to. All I'm saying is, if you want to invest 99% in venture capital, go nuts. It's your money, right? But have a process around it. Be disciplined about it. Don't take it personally. Have the rebalancing triggers in place, the investment checklists, the reviews. I do love a good review just to make sure that we're on track. Rules, like I said, rules made in advance survive noise, and especially noise where there's so much fear potentially, or there's so many, we've got portfolio constituents that are volatile and moving. If you can remove some of that noise and make it, well, it fits the bill still. It still fits in the roles and responsibilities still. Having that comfort of leaning onto that can be really, really helpful, and being disciplined around it. Process creates consistency, right? Across generations. It's not just who's in now. It's being able to say, well, the previous generation built this amazing process. And what that process allows us to do is to have flexibility, to invest how we want and have philosophies and things like that, but still being still having some level of justification for it, right? And lastly, number 6, reporting is evidence. I love reporting. I really, really do, because I love good reporting. Good reporting allows us to really clearly, at the investment committee level in particular. So when we sit down and we're in the investment committee meeting and we've done the pre-reading, we've got it all in place, and we see the reports, and we can see what we said we would do being genuinely reflected in what we've done or what the portfolio is doing. And that can only be done if reporting is in place, and good, accurate, clean reporting. Because as I've said in the past, good reporting creates good advice, right? Most reporting at minimum should describe what has happened, right? Good reporting evaluates whether it should have happened as well. And that same reporting should be reflective of the actual portfolio versus the IPS. And the IPS is a proxy here for what we said we would do. So the portfolio is what we've done, and the IPS has said what we said we would do, and we can compare the pair. We can compare the two. Reporting is proof here. Reporting is proof that you've done what you said you would do, or it's proof that you're not doing what you said you would do. And I'm not trying to be didactic and a teacher or anything like that here. I'm not trying to be, like I said, the killjoy, but there is an element of, and there is, because we talk about intergenerational, we talk about, this money is not us. We are stewards of these assets. And you can't be good stewards of assets if you're not doing what you said you would do. So, in conclusion, like I said, the portfolio doesn't lie. It's proof, right? It shows exactly what you prioritized when the moment came. So say what you'll do what you said, report the difference. And that's literally the whole job. So if you're interested in understanding how I would do work with family offices on this thing, I mean, like I said, I sit on the investment committee. A big part of it is that judgment, that advice that comes from the reporting piece, that being able to sort of say, hang on a second, we said we would do this. We're not doing it. So, and I'm independent. I'm independent of the office. I'm independent of the family. I can be that critical friend for a lot of clients. So just, if you're interested, just email me, Shaun, SHAUN, @hallroad.com.au, or message me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on that one. If you like this content, the podcast, then you can, please subscribe to the Sherpa newsletter. It's been going for over 7 years now and can be found at hallroad.com.au. If you enjoy the podcast, please ding the bell, get some, get an alert so you get the next one. If you think someone else would be interested in it, I'd love it if you forward it on to them. If you're looking for more information around newsletters, guides, videos, and things like that, go to thefamilyofthesherpa.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.